Family, there was a season where I wasn't sure I still believed what I had been taught my whole life. I didn't lose my faith completely, but it did take it all the way down to the studs. And recently, a young woman sat across from me for almost 3 hours asking the same questions that I once did. So today, we are talking about deconstruction and the part nobody tells you about, what it takes to rebuild. Let's get to work. It's the Pursuit Podcast with Pastor Josh. Let's go. Hey, family, what's going on? This is Pastor Josh, and I want to thank you for tapping into another episode of the Pursuit Podcast. I know that we took a week off last week, but for good reason. And I want to thank many of you all for being a part of that reason. I had the honor of being one of the featured speaker, the morning preacher for the Hampton Ministers Conference, which is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, gathering of African American clergy preaching conference, if you will. And it just was an honor of a lifetime to be able to go down and to be a part of that on the main stage. And so after that, I needed to rest. I needed to vacate for a little bit. My son graduated from preschool, and then I just needed a few days to get away, to not work, and to just reset my brain. So thank you all for allowing me to miss a little bit of time, but we are back at it, and I'm grateful for all of your prayers and all of your love. Let's jump into this episode. This piece about deconstruction, I am hearing more and more in my encounters with young adults and young adults of faith, of Christian faith. And this is not a new idea, though I think the language of deconstruction is something that we're hearing more and more in faith conversations online, on TikTok, on YouTube. And so I just want to give a few statistics about deconstruction itself, and hopefully be able to share with you some nuggets from my own story. Really, I was pushed to go forward with this episode. We were going to have another episode this week, but I was pushed in my spirit to go forward with this because of a conversation I had with a young Christian, a young woman who came to me and said, Pastor, I'm dealing with some stuff, some questions. I heard about your deconstruction journey, and I wanted to hear more about what that was like for you, as I feel like I'm in a place where my faith is being deconstructed. And so let me start with some statistics. There's a study by the Barna Group called Engaging the Spiritually Open. They surveyed over 2,000 U.S. adults, and this is what they came up with in this report that was released by the Barna Group. It said that 42% of American adults say that they have deconstructed the faith of their youth. Let me say it one more time. 42% of American adults, almost half of American adults at some point or another, say that they have deconstructed the faith of their youth. Among today's Christians, it's 37% with little difference whether they're practicing or non-practicing. And the striking part of that is that more than a third of committed church-going Christians relate to having deconstructed the faith of their youth. When we talk about deconstruction, we are saying it means to break down the faith, the principles, the themes, the ideas that one once carried from their childhood, and often ideas and beliefs that were inherited. You were giving to them. You were given these ideas, given these understandings, given these teachings without much observation and without much investigation of your own. And it is the process of examining what you believe. It is the process of going through in a systematic way what you believe, why you believe it, and if you still believe it. And again, I was prompted by a very important young adult who is connected to our ministry, was having real questions and wanted to hear about my own process. And I shared over that long conversation, 3 hours that we had almost, many of the things that I want to share today with our audience for the Pursuit Podcast. Again, if you are in a place where you are having questions about some of what you believe, you are not alone. As we said, there are still 42% of American adults have said at one point or another they have deconstructed the faith of their youth. Almost 1 in 2, right, have been in a place. 2 out of 5 adults have been in a place where they've had to break down and deconstruct where they've been. And so I want to talk about sort of my own experience in this idea of deconstruction. And I want to talk about some of the things that I've learned and some principles that I think will help you if you are where this young lady was, or if you are where I was in the process of deconstruction, and prayerfully give you a roadmap to reconstructing, rebuilding a faith that is yours, that can withstand the test of time and withstand some of the attacks that may come into it. So to give you some context on my own journey, I grew up in a predominantly African American Baptist context in what I would consider to be a family church. And when I say family, I mean, yes, my family we were a big part of that church. My grandfather, when I was coming up, was the pastor. My father was on the deacon board. My uncles and aunts sang and served in different positions. This was my family, but the people of our church were also family to me, extended family to me. I was there 3-4 times a week. We traveled from Baltimore to DC, where the church was, and in the beginning of my remembrance and recollection, my grandfather, while he pastored, my dad serving as the chair of the deacon board, we were there. And then when my grandfather transitioned out of ministry, or out of that pastoral ministry, my dad took over as the pastor of our church. And so we were there even more. And in that context, I was given a faith tradition that I value. I was in Bible study. I was in Sunday school. I learned the core tenets of the Christian faith. I was able to hear and to develop an understanding of the Bible, an understanding of the divisions within the book, the genres, though I didn't have the language for it then. Every Bible study on Thursday nights, we would go through the books of the Bible, and my dad would break them down. Old Testament, books of law, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, the books of history, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, and Esther. Books of poetry, Job, Psalm, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and on and on and on. So we were learning that there were genres. We were learning the books of the Bible. We were in Bible study every week. We were in Sunday school on Sundays, even if it was just because Sister Little John made the sausage biscuits. Hey, you gotta get fish however you're gonna get fish, okay? But I learned my initial faith there, and through our time in the church, and through our singing, through our music. We don't talk about it enough, but a lot of our theology is created through the music that we are singing, that we are listening to, that we are regurgitating. And so I built a certain faith tradition there. When I go off to college, I become a part of a Christian fraternity and sorority, and that too helps to shape some of my faith, particularly as a young adult. I think it would be qualified and maybe understood now as a more evangelical, Christian, conservative, theologically, not in terms of how we looked. You know, we were African Americans primarily. We were Greek lettered organization. We stepped, but we also were given a certain theology that I think some would maybe say is moderate to conservative and evangelical in its tenets and in its principles. And that helped to shape the music I listened to. So for those, I very much was into, at that time, the cross movement. I was very much into Christian hip hop, and a lot of that teaching was Calvinist. It was, some, I now know, forms of Reformed theology is a form. I learned a lot of that. I learned a lot of that through the music, through the teaching, and I added that to my sort of traditional cultural Christian faith that I had. Well, when I got to seminary is when I think that my formal process of deconstruction began. In seminary, and as I shared with the young woman, for me, deconstruction does not have to be a bad thing. And I think that it can be done in a safe way. Even before I got to seminary, I would hear people like Emmanuel Lambert, who was known in the Christian hip hop community as The Truth, who was one of the rappers that I really was influenced by as a young adult in my Christian walk, talk about crises of faith, where he would come up on different teachings, come up on different information that was not necessarily Christian, different faith traditions, history, and he just had questions. And I can identify now that there were questions that I had as a young person. I just didn't know how to ask them. I had questions about, in the creation story that we learned, where did the dinosaurs fit into that? I had questions about theodicy, God, a good God, all knowing, all loving God, and evil in the world. I had questions about slavery, to be frank, and where God was in the midst of suffering. Those are questions of theodicy and justice. I had questions. And so I had questions about faith and science and how they intersect, right? As I'm learning more about science and the universe and the world, how does that intersect with the Genesis narrative or narratives that I have learned about creation and where God is and all of that? And so all of that is a part of the shaping and the framing, or the shaping and the reframing of my faith. And so I think the place where I was able to begin that process of deconstruction was in seminary. I went to Virginia Union University, and here's what I believe about a good seminary. A good seminary will take you to a place of structured, systematic reconstruction with the responsibility of helping you to reconstruct. And so in our process, which is to me what makes seminary maybe, or what I would call a good seminary, different from some Bible college experiences I know. I think in Bible college, the focus is to reaffirm what you already know and to maybe give you more knowledge around what you already know. I think seminary gives you the opportunity in structured teaching, systematic teaching of people who, and this is not always the case, but people who have conversed with hard questions, history, science, reason, faith. They've done this work on a high level, scholars, and have still maintained a semblance of faith that can help to lead you to hard information, but not away from the truth of who God is and what God is. That's what I believe the best seminaries are able to do. And so for us, that deconstruction process began in our second year of our Masters of Divinity program. Our Masters of Divinity program is a 3-year journey at Virginia Union. And in the second year, you have something called Systematic Theology One. Systematic Theology One is designed to help you to look at what you believe and for you to begin to be an apologist, if you will. Apologist, what is that? That's somebody who is able to defend your faith. This is done on a personal level where you are looking at the key tenets of your faith. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? In concert with other information and truth that you have to wrestle with. That year was hard for us. That year, and when I say us, I mean many of the classmates who we lived on campus. We lived in Kingsley Hall at Virginia Union because we had to wrestle with these things day to day. We had to wrestle with our ideas, our doctrine, and some of what we were forced to look at stood, and some of what we were forced to look at in our own faith and our own tenets did not stand. And there are some people who may walk away from faith completely when having to defend for themselves, not what grandmama told you, not what daddy told you, but you have to look at your own belief and own thoughts and how you get there. Some people don't make it out of that process. But I'm grateful because in most good seminaries, you don't just have Systematic One that breaks down and forces you to take a look at what you really believe, but you ought to have Systematic Two, which is the process of rebuilding that faith and building a faith toolbox where you can stand on your own, 10 toes down on what you believe, and be able to defend that. Now, I'll admit that coming into, that's your third year, your last year, we had a system at Virginia Union where our Dean John Kinney, was often the one that was able to teach systematic to and had the tools to help rebuild, reconstruct the faith after a year of deconstruction. Our class was unique in that he was out that year, had surgery, wasn't able to teach the class that he normally taught. And we had a good systematic two instructor, but I left with still pieces that were not fully back together in terms of my faith. And I shared with the young lady that one of the best things that happened to me was I was able to go from seminary to Texas, where I was able to get immediately back into church. Sometimes what happens in the process of deconstruction, whether you're doing it on your own or whether you're doing it in a academic setting, is that you are away from the faith community. And when you are away from the faith community, you don't feel, you're just in your head. And there is something about what you feel, what you experience within a community of faith that points to a God that you may not read about in scholastic work. And so for me, I had the benefit of going first to Greater Barbers Chapel Church in Texas City and then Wheeler Avenue Baptist Church. And I credit Dr. Marcus D. Cosby, who's my pastor, for in that first year of working on staff, truly preaching the Jesus back into me. There was something about his preaching that was steeped in a faith in God, an unshakable, unmovable faith in God that helped to restore my belief and my faith in Jesus and in the power in that name that had been shaken a bit as I was working through my process of deconstruction. And over those years, as I heard him preach literally hundreds, if not thousands of times, we had 4 services back in Houston at that time. It helped me as I preached in a sermon this year. I was preaching at the 7 Last Words at Wheeler Avenue, and I talked about how I was able to find the Lord again through community, through the preaching of the gospel, and it helped me to refine and to reconstruct the faith that I now carry. Now, let me say, even as somebody who has been connected to academic spaces, seminary spaces, faith development for over a decade at this point, as student, as professor, as teacher, as somebody who works with young ministers, or somebody who works with young adults in faith, I do not have all the answers, Sway. I still am not in a place where I have answers to every theological question that I have. What I do have, however, is a new respect for God, because out of my deconstruction process, what I took most from it is that God is bigger than the God that I knew. God was bigger than the God that I had created. I had created a very, very legalistic, rule-oriented, small God. And if I encountered something that did not fit in the box of understanding that my adolescent mind had around who God was, what God desired, who God could speak through, who God loved, I rejected it. But that deconstruction process helped me to see a much bigger God, a God who had sheep that were not in the same fold as the one that I came out of, a God that created the universe, and a God that was not afraid of my questions, a God that was not afraid of diversity. And so I think what I want to share with you today are some of the things that I think are important if you are finding yourself in a process of deconstruction that I hope will lead you to reconstruction. And I want to do it through the eyes of one of the prominent figures of the Christian canon, and that is Paul, who I believe is a model for deconstruction and reconstruction. Why do you say that? Paul, also known as Saul, begins his journey in the New Testament as somebody who already has a faith framework. He is a Jew of Jews. He has studied under Gamaliel. He has gone to school to learn his faith. He has an idea of who God is and what God is about. And when these Christians come along, it rubs up against Paul's preconceived theology. What is theology? It is our understanding of God. It rubs up against Paul's preconceived theology, and God has to literally knock Paul off of a high horse on the Damascus Road so that he would start the process of deconstructing, of breaking down, what he already believed so that he could see something new about God. So that he could see something new about God, and so that he could create a new understanding of what God was. Here are some principles that I want to take from the life of Paul that I have kind of seen the importance of in my own process of deconstruction and then reconstruction that I think are important. And number one is that deconstruction should not be done in isolation. When Paul has this experience on the Damascus Road where he is blinded and God begins to reveal something new about who God is to Paul, Paul does not go through this process by himself. He deconstructs what he has known as a legalistic Jew. He deconstructs this in a community first of disciples, right? And then they take him to the apostles, those who had already been teaching and preaching and moving around in this new way that Paul was being exposed to, so that he could learn and grow first before he jumped out to teach and preach other people. All right. That's important because a lot of times when we are going through a process of deconstruction, when we are examining our faith and breaking it down in a systematic way, we run away from community. We run away from the church. And deconstruction can be healthy and it can be safe when it's done around the right community. For me, the right community was other seminarians and professors who had already gone through the process we were going through, so that they could speak with knowledge and with faith about where we were and what we were wrestling with. So you want, if you are going through the process of deconstruction, it should be done not in isolation, but within community. Finding a safe community of trusted leaders, trusted teachers, trusted voices who have done the work. That's important. Who have done the work, that will give you the space to ask your questions, the space to formulate your own framework, but also who are well-versed, well-grounded in God, history, reason, science, in their own scholarship that can walk you through. And for me, that is the importance of seminary. That is the importance of systematic theology, number one. It is a dialogue that leads to deconstruction, but it is guided by professors. It is guided by preachers who have done their own work, valid work, who have done valuable study and have maintained faith while being confronted by facts that have maybe challenged what they used to know. All right. So deconstruction should not be done in isolation. But number two, deconstruction should make you less dangerous. The text says that the scales are removed from Paul's eyes and he hears the voice of God when he's knocked off the high horse on the Damascus Road. And God knocks him off his high horse primarily because he is harming those people that God loves in the name of God. Go read the text. Go read the story for yourself in the book of Acts. When Paul is first confronted by God and begins this process of deconstruction, it is because Paul, or Saul at that time, is among those who are literally stoning Christians, stoning other people who believed differently from Saul, not realizing that the one that they are persecuting, as God says to Paul, You're persecuting me. Who am I? Paul says, it's Jesus, right? That the one you think is wrong is the God you say you love. You did not have a framework for this God. All right. And so it is important for me. The value of deconstruction for me is the pulling down of potentially harmful theology that is not rooted in Bible or tradition, but is rooted often in our preferences. That some of the theology we've been handed and passed down actually makes us dangerous to people, actually makes us harmful to people, and we don't know what we are doing in the name of God to hurt people. One of the things that deconstruction did for me in a seminary setting is it made me less arrogant. I was very judgmental, very, very, very harsh on people, not realizing that, like Paul, I had a legalistic bend that came out of a certain tradition without full understanding of who God was. And so that sort of impassioned rebuke, arrogant rebuke of people died in deconstruction for me and prayerfully made me less harmful, less dangerous to folks. Last thing, and I'll go, is that deconstruction should not be done for deconstruction's sake. I'm not just deconstructing to break down what I believe. It should have the aim of reconstruction. When God speaks to Paul on the Damascus Road and he clarifies who he is, he says, this is Jesus. I am the one that you are persecuting. Jesus points Paul to his error in his old understanding and his old theology. But Paul also then sits with the apostles to learn and grow a new theology. It is not simply enough to deconstruct. You have to replace that with something. And replacement, as I've said from my own journey, doesn't always mean you are throwing everything out. A lot of the faith of my childhood, I carry now. I live in now. It needed to be examined because you have to have a ready response, scripture says, for the belief that you have. I never thought about why I believe certain things, and that is good. But the aim wasn't just to tear down the old. It is to sit with the apostles to learn and grow the new, the improved, the sharper version of the theology that you have. In seminary, we're not left in deconstruction. We don't have systematic one and don't have a systematic two to build us back up. It's important that we are not just going through the process of breaking it down, but there ought to be a plan and a hope for reconstruction amongst a community of guides that can help you to do that. And so, family, as we come kind of to the close of this episode, if you find yourself in a place where you are wrestling with belief, you are wrestling with the deconstruction of the theology that you grew up with, and you are fearful of that, I want to encourage you to reach out to us. Reach out to us. You can hit me at joshua@joshualmitchell.org. I want to have some conversations with you, hopefully to provide some resources for you that might be helpful along the journey. And we'll continue to have conversations like these because I think that deconstruction can be a safe and needed response to crises of faith. But the aim for us ought to be the reconstruction of a faith of your own that you can stand on, that you can live with, and that you can defend. Today, as we conclude what's in my media, I've been checking out this Man on Fire on Netflix, and I am enjoying being able to see how they have recreated this character of Creasy, and just really enjoying that piece and how it is that conflict, how it is that life or death helps to bring out what is dormant in us when we have something to fight for. And so I pray that you find what it is that you are called to fight for in this season and see the kind of man or woman that it brings out of you. as a response. I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. Thank you for rocking with us on the Pursuit podcast. And listen, most of our audience, you're checking out the episodes, but you're not subscribed. We need you to subscribe on YouTube, www.youtube.com/@Joshua Mitchell TV, and subscribe on Apple, subscribe on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. It helps us to expand the reach, and we're grateful for you. I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. We will see you on the very next episode of the Pursuit podcast with Pastor Josh. Peace and love.